a podcast to honor the gods.
This better come with a sacrifice.
Dave X Media.
Hi everyone, editing Christina here. I just wanted to stop by before the episode gets started and let you know that we recorded this before the SAG-AFTRA strikes started, or at least really caught momentum in a way that I noticed. So we do mention many works of film and TV that we endorse in this episode, but looking at it through the lens of the strike that so many people are putting their time and energy into right now, it just didn't feel right to let those fly without a little announcement up here at the top to remind you to do your own research, make your own decisions, do your best to support creators and artists in your own community and beyond. That includes the stuff that you choose to watch. So we support artists and the work they do. We support fair pay for artists who are working on these movies for these, especially these major studios. So you'll be hearing an announcement like this at the top of every episode until the strikers and the studios come to terms that are agreeable to everyone, which I and everyone hope will be soon. Make your own choices. Your dad loves you. I'm proud of you, champ. I know you'll do the right thing. And if you want to learn more about the SAG-AFTRA strike, please check the show notes for a link to their website. Welcome to the restricted section, the hardest breakup of my life, including January 2006 when Rory dumped me and I listened to Imogen Heap's Hide and Seek about 100 times per day. If you haven't done the reading, don't worry, we did it for you. Here's what we're talking about this week. Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Chapter 3, Will and Won't, in which Dumbledore fetches Harry from the Dursleys to tell him that he's inherited Sirius's everything, including his house, and then whisks him away on an adventure. I'm your host, Christina. My co-host today is, I guess, assuming that we've invited her inside, Brooke. Say hello to the listeners, Brooke.
Hello. I am actually a vampire because in terms of bad breakups, I never outgrew my Twilight phase. So you did have to invite me in, and thank you for doing so.
And I am so supremely excited because our special guests today are Katy and Emily from Potterversity podcast. Say hello to the listeners, Katy.
Hey, it's so great to be here.
And say hello to the listeners, Emily.
Hello there. Thanks for having us.
Okay, so now the listeners have a grasp on your voices and can tell you apart. Tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Well, this is, we call it the Hermione Approved podcast. It's on MuggleNet, and we do a lot of academic, Harry Potter analyses. But it's not just literary analysis. We do political, social. We look at the fandom. So we're interested in all the scholarship out there. And we kind of like a deep dive into, the world of the Potterverse. So,
yeah.
Yes.
It's great. I love it because it's kind of a virtual space where a lot of academics who love Harry Potter and love to talk about and analyze Harry Potter come together. So we get to host that party. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just a friendly air. I kind of get to connect with people who are doing cool things, and it's just really fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a wonderful podcast, and one of my favorite episodes is one that actually came out maybe like a month ago by the time this episode comes out about Jane Austen and Harry Potter. I love that episode so much. I'm a huge Austen slut. So I think there's like a little bit of something for everyone on your show.
Yeah,
we hope so.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, and we it's amazing. Like we never run out of things to talk about. I'm sure you find that too,
Yeah.
There's always something to say.
Totally. So I know that y'all do a lot outside this podcast. What other kinds of things do y'all do professionally and, for funsies?
Yeah, well, I'm a historian, so I teach history at Marietta College. And I guess, the question like, why are you doing Harry Potter stuff? I'm interested in kind of the intersections of pop culture and history. So I've done some other things with like Connie Willis. She writes about time-traveling historians. And I got a new piece I'm trying to work on about the Princess Bride. So I'm just very keen on all those, the way that like we understand history and our relationship to it through pop culture. That's just where that's what brings me joy.
That is so cool. And Harry Potter is definitely like the right place to be if you're looking at history through the lens of pop culture. It's happening, baby.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am also a professor. So I teach actually nursing students at a local college here in Columbus, Ohio, Mount Carmel College of Nursing. I teach them a comparative religions class and a cultural competency class to help them, give culturally competent care. I have another podcast called Meet Father Rivers. It's about a particular figure in the recent history of the Catholic Church who sort of broke racial barriers and composed music out of a Black sacred song tradition. So that's kind of like totally different, but not really, because I'm also a musician, so it all fits together. And I am huge on Star Wars as well. I've had a couple.
I need to connect you to somebody who's starting a new podcast.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I just had a new anthology that I co-edited with Dr. Amy H. Sturgis on Star Wars come out, and it's a collection of 10 essays all about the galaxy far, far away. So I tend to look at the religious themes in popular culture. That's kind of my jam. But I also I have an essay. I was interested in this chapter because I have an essay coming out soon in another anthology about parenting in Harry Potter and what parenting styles are like in Harry Potter and what we can learn from them. So
what parenting? No, I'm just kidding. Obviously it does exist, but damn.
There's either too much or not enough.
Yeah. We need to work on that.
Gotta say, I appreciate everything you do with religious education of nurses. You should have seen the panic in the nurses' eyes when I went to have my baby and they're like, any faith traditions? I'm staunchly atheist and my husband is very Catholic, so good luck.
Deal with it.
They were like, the nurses were like that meme of that lady doing the math. They're like,
oh yeah.
Like, who do I send to this room?
Wow. And you know what? Brooke has a master's degree, and I was in gifted classes in elementary school, so this might be the most qualified episode of the podcast we've ever had.
We're bringing it.
My degree is in sustainable tourism. If we manage to work that in, I'll be shocked.
So let me just say, too, that Emily very kindly allowed me to do an essay for her Star Wars book, and it's a Harry Potter Star Wars mashup. It's
my God.
It
Ray
is. It's
and
brilliant.
Ray
What
and
is this?
Harry.
You said, what is the book called again?
It's called Star Wars Essays Exploring a Galaxy Far, Far Away, and it's by Vernon Press. And as we're recording this, it was published yesterday, so I'm still in party mode.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. That's incredible. Oh my God.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
so excited for you. A link to that will obviously be in the show notes. Look, there you are, right there.
Awesome.
Right at the
Thank
top.
you. And I have to say, Katie's chapter is right after mine. We're chapter 4 and 5, and Katie's chapter will blow your mind in terms of the parallelisms between Harry Potter, especially Harry and Ray, the character of Ray. So super brilliant stuff.
So cool. That is so cool. Okay, so everyone buy that. I'm obsessed with that. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Let's talk now. Katy, what is your Harry Potter history? When did you get into the books, the movies? What's up with that?
Yeah, so I'm an older lady. So I'm no shame in my age. I'm very happy to be my age, but I'm 51. So I was not a kid when the books came out. I wasn't interested at all. They were not on my radar when they first came out. I was in graduate school, and graduate school will crush your soul. It's full of Dementors.
Oh, God, yeah.
And so my aunt gave me the first, I think, 2 or maybe even all 3 books. And so that's what they were there, and they were not, postmodernist history. So,
oh, yeah.
So I read them, and I was like, it was just like being given back little bits of my soul.
Oh,
and
that's so beautiful.
Yeah. And so
my God.
I never really thought of myself as a fan. It's so funny. But I was like, everybody I knew, I was like, here, I bought you a copy of this book. Here, you should read this. I want to talk to you about it when you're done. What chapter are you on? And then at a certain point, when I was in my first full-time teaching job, well, I guess it's not my first one, but the tenure track job at Marietta College, it's really, again, I was just burned out and it was rough. And I didn't have any ideas, but I was listening to Harry Potter book 4 while I washed dishes at night on audio. Love Jim Dale. And then I guess this maybe the second movie came out, and I was teaching a course in European feminism. And it's like a European women's history course. And I thought, hey, the house elves are like unliberated 1950s housewives. And second wave feminism has a lot to say about house elves, which we'll be talking about later as well, like house elves and their bondage, which is kind of weird. Like, do they like it? Are they happy to be in domestic servitude or not? And
if they are, what is that saying?
Right. Gotta say, and then I vastly prefer that take to the slavery parallel.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think I'd agree.
Yeah, I think it's hard to understand the perspective of like the house elves if you're thinking about it in terms of African American slavery. And I think there's some similar themes there, but I thought it was a little easier to look at the feminist theoretical literature as just a little bridge to that. Of course, they could represent all kinds of different things.
Yeah, but I really do like your reading because and we will talk about this more later, but you're right that there is an element of like at least in the book, I don't agree with this decision, but they want to be there. So
right. And they get their identity from that. And there's all kinds of and Winky's so upset that she's like been divorced by Mr. Crouch.
Wow.
And so I was like, I have an idea. And I wrote it up and it was rejected from the book that I submitted it to. But I got it into a conference. And from that conference, I just happened to be on a panel with somebody who did a podcast. And he was like, you want to come on my podcast? And that was my podcast beginnings. And I started to have more Harry Potter ideas. And here I am.
That's amazing. I too guested on a podcast and then was like, this can't be that hard. And joke's on us, it is hard.
right. Yeah, hosting it. Oh, man. Just finding a time, I don't know if you ever have to cross lots of time zones.
God,
to me,
yes.
It's like,
we're on a network and one of our beloved hosts of another show is in Australia. So whenever we do any network meetings or recordings or anything, it's like, so sorry, Sam. Can you please get up at 6 o'clock before work?
Does 2 a.m. work?
Like he's joined a meeting from in bed, and it's like that's fine. That's fine.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Our technical director Emma Nicholson for Potterversity, she is also in Australia, and she routinely joins us before work. God bless her. But a lot of times it'll just be we have a little like a text thread, and we'll just be like, like debating something or, discussing something or, and Emma will realize later that it was all night for Emma.
Yeah, Emma wakes up in the morning and they're like 50 different messages. She's like, wow,
I missed something, didn't I?
Oh, group chats. So beautiful, so obnoxious. Mm-hmm. So, Katy, what, and if you don't ascribe? No, if you don't subscribe to this, is that right?
Ascribe is good.
Ascribe. If you don't jive with this, you don't have to answer it. But if
this
you
is
identify,
not the vibe. Our very educated beginning.
Word retrieval is always like my biggest problem. I'm literally a writer and an editor, and I get on this podcast and I don't know a single word. But what Hogwarts house are you?
Okay, so I have to say, I have been sorted into all the houses.
Whoa, you're divergent.
I guess, right, so the original Pottermore, the clunky one, I was sorted into Slytherin, and I was like, and I was
Identity
like,
crisis.
trying not to panic. And then when they came out with a new one, I was like, ooh, I'll do it all over again, because you had to do it all over again. And I was working very hard to not be Slytherin. And I came out Hufflepuff.
It seems like maybe that's something a Slytherin would do, though.
Maybe, right? I don't know. But I'm like, not Slytherin, right? The hat listens. Not Slytherin, not Slytherin. But on some other quizzes, I have come out Gryffindor and Ravenclaw. And I personally think I would probably be a Ravenclaw, although I do love Hufflepuff values. Like, I'm into the Hufflepuff values, and I like the Badger. The Badger's
totally.
Cool.
We've been kind of having this conversation ongoing on the podcast about like what even is a house. And I think that what we've kind of landed on is that it feels best for everyone when they're aspirational. Like I value the values of Hufflepuff House. Am I always like the best friend? No, I make mistakes and sometimes I Gryffindor my ass straight into something that I have no business. being a part of. But like, I think the fact that you aspire to the Hufflepuff values is what makes you a Hufflepuff.
Nice. I'll take that.
Woo! Okay, Emily, your turn. What's your Harry Potter history? Tell me everything.
So it's a little similar to Katie's in that I was a first-year master's student when a friend of mine handed me the first 3 books. I had just read like a bazillion theology books for the semester, and it was like way too much. And
A bit of light reading.
A bit of light reading. And she was like, here you go, brain candy for you. And I did. I totally burned through them. But then the more I read them, the more I studied. I was studying theology. So I was like, oh my gosh, like there's a lot going on here that really overlaps with my studies. And so I just became really intensely interested in the books for those reasons. And I would listen to podcasts while I jogged at the gym, and I would like shout my part of the conversation because I had parts of the conversation that were not being represented, and
everyone else in the park is like, don't go near that person over there.
Right. And it was like me running around the gym at the school that I taught at, and this like my students would like, they would never know me because when I suck my hair back and put it in a hat, like you can't, and have my glasses off, like I don't look the same. They would be like, who's that? Professor Strand. Like, she's shouting about Harry Potter. So, and they knew about the Harry Potter.
A menace to the neighborhood.
Yeah, totally. So eventually I actually ended up taking some graduate courses at an online institution called Signum University, which is still going strong. And they have all kinds of graduate master's level courses on pop culture properties like Harry Potter and Star Wars. I've taken courses on science fiction there. I've taken a course on Star Trek and Celtic myth and children's fantasy literature. I mean, just really awesome topics. Yeah. And for master's credit, very affordable, all online. Super awesome. Great outlet for probably some of your listeners if they're interested in graduate work, but kind of don't want to go the traditional route. Mm-hmm. So I took a course on Harry Potter from Amy Sturgis, and she... I was like there was like a discussion thread, like, you had to like post a certain amount. And so people were like posting like, what is the thing that you think doesn't work in Harry Potter? And so
where do I begin?
Well, right. I mean, there was a diversity of responses, but I have to say the most overwhelmingly popular response was Quidditch. And I was like,
that makes sense.
I was like, guys, but Quidditch is not really supposed to be there to be a sport. It's symbolic of the narrative. And they were like, what?
Whoa.
Like, everyone was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, isn't it obvious? And they were like, write it down. So I wrote it down, and it ended up being published in an anthology. And that is how I started being invited to be on podcasts. And then eventually Katy so kindly invited me to co-host Potterversity with her. So that's kind of my...
And so here's how Emily and I connected together too. Like, who gave Amy Sturgis her first Harry Potter book? Like, she was my friend in graduate school, and I was like,
my God.
Amy, I know you're a very dark person and not likely to want to read a children's book, but this one starts with a double murder, so I think you're going to like it.
Well, and it looks like she also worked on this Star Wars book that's open.
And she's big into all this, and so she got very into it, and then she taught that class at Signum, and I was putting together Harry Potter for Nerds 2, and this anthology of Harry Potter essays, and I was like, I'm looking for good essays, and Amy was like, I got this person in my class right now, Emily Strand. She's writing about Quidditch. And I was like, bring it.
Oh, my God. Yep. Okay, so obviously we'll be covering a lot of this on the bonus show because this is all... You just blew my mind that the Quidditch is a metaphor for the story.
Hey, if you go to academia.edu and find my profile, which is just Emily Strand, you can download that paper for free. It's right
really
there.
Cool.
And it's a fun little paper. I feel like it's academic, but it's not, because it has footnotes, but it's not like anybody can understand it. Like it tells a pretty coherent, makes a pretty coherent argument for why Quidditch is really just kind of this symbol set in the narrative that points in all these different, like the way that it has 2 spheres of play, like that makes no sense for a sport. That makes no sense. It's like a football. One critic I read said it's like a football game going on, American football game, with like a couple people playing tetherball in the middle of the field.
Yes,
like it makes no sense whatsoever. But narratively, it works perfectly because you have the war against Voldemort going on and the Death Eaters versus the Order of the Phoenix. But then you have Harry and sometimes Ron and Hermione working independently to do this secret thing that people aren't even aware of. So it really works on a lot of levels. Like the more I looked into it and wrote about it, the more like connections that I found, and I was like, whoa, she didn't know about sports, but she knew about narratives and symbols.
This is incredible. So usually the guests on this podcast are like my stoner friends from college. So you're blowing my mind right now.
These are like we're like right out the gate with two like awesome, incredibly digestible takes on the two most hated elements of this narrative. That's right.
We're here to provide. We're here to provide.
That's amazing. Emily, what Hogwarts house are you? If you ascribe or subscribe or jive with that.
I do both, and I do both to Gryffindor. Every test I take is like, Gryffindor. They're like, okay, Gryffindor. Oh my God, Gryffindor.
Okay, I love that for you. That's awesome. And I'm so sorry. It's been a while since we've had new guests on the podcast, so you'll have to apologize for my rudeness in not asking you sooner for the both of you to please tell the listeners what your pronouns are.
Oh, mine are the female pronouns, she, her.
She, her?
Yep, me too. She, her.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, cool. So it's time to get to the chapter. I love a good little pre-chapter chit-chat. So I feel like we don't even need to talk about the chapter. I've learned so much already today.
But it's such a good chapter.
Yeah, it is a good chapter.
It is a good chapter, which is shocking. This is chapter 3, Will and Won't. It's shocking that it's good because this is usually the worst, weakest chapter of any Harry Potter book. The Harry Potter was a very special boy chapter. I think that our saving grace is by book 6, the author was like, you're not reading this without having read the rest. You're just not doing that anymore. But previously, every single book, we've had a chapter that's been like, Harry Potter was a very special boy, and he was asleep in his bedroom, but it wasn't an ordinary bedroom. It had magical things in it because Harry Potter was a magical boy.
Right. No, but I love this one. Can I tell you? So of course, I was like, oh, it's chapter 3. It will be very easy for me, and I really should, for accuracy, I should read all the chapters around it. So just any excuse to go back into it. And I was like, okay, so this book has a weird beginning, right?
Yeah,
it first
it's totally
begins
different.
From like a crazy point of view, like the Prime Minister of England. That is our point of view to start
Muggle
with.
Prime Minister of England, yes.
Yeah, Muggle.
Yeah, right. And then you have really creepy chapter 2, Spinner's End. And I know your previous podcast will have done this. And that's a super creepy chapter. That's where the movie starts, the story.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then for our chapter, it starts with Harry's face smushed on the window glass.
It's like adults are doing very serious things, and Harry's just asleep.
He's just
Right,
asleep.
it's like comedy. It's you start
very
the chapter
funny.
and you're like, oh, now it's time for the humor. Now I'm going to get my comic relief.
But she's also, in the chapter, it also is such a more natural backstory dump than everything that comes before. Because like if you study fiction writing, if you are in a writer's group or what, you read books about fiction writing, everything they say is don't backstory dump. You cannot do that. Not in the first chapter of your book. You need to start with action. You need to start with something that's exciting, intriguing. And she violates that on the regular, as you said, by giving you all this backstory. I went back and looked at the corresponding chapters in book 2. And they were just egregious in the backstory dump. And here she gives you this really fascinating window into what's happening in the wizarding world by just laying a bunch of, with this omniscient point of view, all knowing, right, all seeing, laying a bunch of articles out on Harry's bed for you to only be able to read part of, which is so tantalizing because you want to read the rest of them. They're interesting.
They are interesting, but it's also great because it's like, well, if we read the whole things, that would be too much.
It would be too much, right? It just gives you exactly what you need to know to remember what happened at the end of book 5.
Yeah. And then here's what I was thinking. So also then the last bit of writing that you read is the only thing that Harry really cares about, which is the letter from Dumbledore saying Dumbledore's going to pick him up after he's only been at the Dursleys for a couple of weeks. And that's the one he's like been fixated on, and it's flat. He's been reading it so much. And so I thought that sort of showed you the importance of the documents in the, in the narrative itself. So I thought that was cool.
I think it's also interesting that the articles focus on 3 different things and there's 3 different perspectives. Like it feels like it's written by 3 different writers or possibly 3 different publications. It feels like you're cross-referencing news sites, you know what I mean? Like one of these is Fox, one of these is CNN, one, you know what I mean? So as you get into the narrative, as we kind of settle back into our primary point of view that we're used to living in for these books, you're still getting these inserts of like the wizarding world, like wider points of view on the current events, which this character has been involved in.
Yeah, which is wild because we've absolutely never heard of a publication outside of the Daily Prophet, the Evening Prophet once, and the Quibbler. So it's like, I guess there is a different newspaper.
Yeah, and I like the government documents. Whenever she does government documents, it's so funny, right? Because it's like the mimicking of the tone is just spot on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's go real fast through the articles. The first article we look at, Harry Potter, The Chosen One, is basically a recap of the last book's finale. The next article talks about how Scrimgeour, oh my God, I will look up the pronunciation of this name 100 times and I will not retain it. I think it's Scrimgeour.
I mean, it looks French in the end, which would lean to a Scrimgeour.
Scrimgeour.
Yeah, I usually just say Scrimgeour.
Yeah.
I just kind of smush it and just.
It was one of those things where when I listened to the British pronunciation of this name, it was like not intuitive to me, and I can't retain it. So
my childhood brain inserted scrimmage and moved right along.
Like Scrimgeour, but like, you know.
Yeah.
So the next article. Yeah, we all hate it. The next article talks about how he has replaced Fudge as the Minister of Magic, which we know already from the first chapter. But then we also learn in this article that Dumbledore has been reinstated at the
Wizengamot.
Why did I spell it the way that fucking Fudge says it in the movie? Do you remember when in the movies he says it dumb one time and I like spelled it that way? Yeah, I think it's in book 3. He says like Wizengamot, and I spelled it that way for some reason.
Well, you know, it's based on the old Anglo-Saxon Council of Elders.
Oh, that's cool.
So, but I think that's Witangamot.
Oh, that's really cool. My brain was just going to Entmoot.
My brain is always going to Entmoot.
Yeah. Entmoot.
So don't be hasty.
My whole brain in the background is just the trees blowing in the wind and assuming that they're saying something important.
They always are.
So then the third article mentions new security measures at Hogwarts. And then it's like, we can't tell you what they are, but here's what they are.
Right.
The insert quote from Neville's, what is it? His
I
grandmother.
love that.
Grandma Augusta.
She is taking her 5 minutes of fame and sprinting with it. Like she even
I love
name
it
drops
so much.
Harry.
Yeah.
She does.
And he was with them at the ministry. You know, I love that. And like Neville deserves some props.
Yeah.
I think it's really nice because we are kind of first introduced to her in the last book. And one of the things that is the overwhelming character trait is that she is not proud of Neville. She disagrees with almost the entire way that he does anything. So this does seem like a moment of her being like, actually, I'm pretty proud. Kid's got balls.
One of the hallmarks of truly good writing, especially when we're looking at a 7-book series like this, is do most of your characters, even your side characters, have arcs in their own way. And like Augusta Longbottom, we see her for all of like 4 sentences, but she has an arc. And her arc goes hand in hand with Neville's arc. As Neville sort of like comes into himself and gains his confidence and becomes like the one true Gryffindor, Augusta, by the end of the series, is like, I'm here to fight with my grandson. And I just got chills because it's like a truly beautiful moment. But she, in this article, really reminds me of my own grandma who, when she was still with us, was so ready to like talk to anyone about anyone's business. Like, like, let me tell you about my grandson and Harry Potter.
Well, I feel like this is really real life too, because I don't know about you, but I know somebody who has several children and the children are like really talented. And I'm looking at them and I'm going, all those children are really talented, but like the mom will refer to one routinely as a dud. I know. And like, I think maybe she's trying to be funny. Like, I really honestly think she's trying to be funny, but to an outsider, it's a little scary. But I always think about Neville when this is going on. And I just wonder and hope that one kid will someday do something that catches her attention enough to make her realize, like, I am proud of this one too, you know?
Yeah,
like,
well, and even more than that, like himself feeling like he has worth despite being told he's a dud.
100%. It
my
makes me so uncomfortable. But like, this is a moment where I'm like, yes, he's totally over. Because she thought he was a dud. Like, they weren't even sure he was magical, you know? Like,
Oh my
they
God,
threw
his
him out the
uncle,
window.
like, yes, his uncle
Right, to see if he would.
would.
And he bounced. And they're like, well, that's something,
God.
you know?
He
It
just
is- it
likes
is something.
plants.
He
Just
really
likes
is.
plants a lot.
But he's brave too, and he's willing to even stand up to his friends, and that's the hardest thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, especially for a kid who doesn't have that many friends, right? So I love her little cameo there, because it's like, yes, totally not a dud. Chip
On
off the
board.
old block.
Yes. Okay, so I'm not weeping. There's also a pamphlet from the ministry with a lot of detail about protecting your family. We get to read the whole thing. It's giving like CDC COVID regulations, you know?
Right.
Deeply.
COVID mort.
I mean, this is terrifying. I have a 10-month-old infant. And if I got this kind of pamphlet at my house and they were like, hey, you're going to need to install heavy duty locks and like, don't ever let your child out of your sight. And like, you need to be able to have a plan to pick her up and run immediately should someone attack you openly. Like, that would be.
Well, and how about,
I don't know what I
how
would
about
do.
security questions? Because people aren't who you think they are.
Oh my
like,
God,
that's
yes.
scary.
Yeah,
And I think
it's
like that's
terrifying.
very like age of the interwebs and the
Yeah.
social media and all that.
Is it a deep fake?
But also, yes, I got fooled by a deep fake recently that was.
Was it Drake?
No, it was that really sexy picture of Henry Cavill that everyone
No,
was
it was
sharing.
either going to be Drake or Henry Cavill.
Me and Mary Clay were talking about it. Our friend Mary Clay, who hosts the Skywalk Before You Run podcast, coming soon. But yeah, I work for a tech company. I work for a hospitality technology company, and we had to do on hire extensive deepfake recognition training.
Wow.
So that you aren't fooled by video recordings or even live Zoom calls from the CEO or like other people that should be in a place of authority within the company. And that's just part of
Wow.
our standard safety briefing.
That's incredible. I mean, that's wild. Incredible, not in the way that like a sunset is incredible.
Yeah. How are we here? How are
Yeah,
we in the most
truly.
dystopian aspects of fantasy?
Well, and I do want to address real quick the security question thing. I mean, every inch of Harry Potter is super ableist. But the security question thing, I've been with my husband for 8 years. I don't know if he can retain facts about me like that. He
That is no
has
joke.
ADHD. Like, I don't know what on earth.
I mean, you could
I'm like,
pick
do you-
something though. Like in Face Off, they have a family question.
Oh my God. Wait, I can't even begin
And a
talking
horse
about
pat.
Face Off. They have the waterfall hands
Yeah.
thing. That's how you know it's him. Yeah, I like don't like because I'm thinking like if with my husband, like what would our security question be? And it's like there's this line in Bob's Burgers where I'm so sorry for those who don't watch Bob's Burgers, but Bob and Linda are a married couple, and Linda is like, oh, I forgot about this event that our kid is having. I forgot about it. And Bob's like, I only know what she knows. And I'm like, how would I get my husband to retain a security question? Like, I have no idea.
I cannot get my husband to remember where certain kitchen utensils go. Like, it just.
Let me tell you today, I was up here in my little office and my beloved husband, Sean, whom I love so much, came up here and was like, I cannot find the cup for the blender. And I was like, it's in the cup cabinet. And he was like, I looked there. And I'm like, it's definitely there. Do you want me to come downstairs and find it right there? And he's like, I guess so, yes. I guess I need that. And I marched my little butt downstairs. I opened the cupboard. It was literally directly at eye level. And he just laughed. It's like...
So I have to say, I would be the problem in this because I would overthink it. My husband's actually he's not necessarily a talker, but he like really knows a lot about me. Well, I'm the talker, right?
That's how he knows so much.
Yeah. And there would be something. And so he actually, when we were getting married and we were going to, pick out a china pattern or whatever, he's like, oh, I've already picked it out. I said, oh, did you find one that you liked? He said, oh no, I found the one you're going to like.
Oh my God.
And I was like, really? I mean, they're like, 50? How many of these are there? And he's like, oh no, it's the one. And he wouldn't tell me which one it was. And I was like, oh crap, now I gotta pick the right one or we're not meant to be together, right?
Did you pick the right one?
I did. And I said,
my God.
This one? And he said, of course that one. There's no other one.
That's so funny because like how on earth you and your husband's security question would be pick the correct China pattern.
That's true.
Because you said it on a podcast.
Oh yeah, it's not
that's
secure
true.
anymore.
Yeah,
And
there's
anybody
that.
looking in my house would see the China. So
Okay.
yeah, but also
It'll need
like
to be something else.
it would be something, and I would be like, "Is it this?" And it would be like, "Of course it is. Maybe you're not the real person."
You know what I definitely wouldn't do? I don't even have children. And you know what I wouldn't do? What I wouldn't do is have my security question with my husband be, what's the sexy name you call me when we're alone together?
Yeah, that was awkward.
7 children, and that's your security question.
But it's Molly Wobbles. That's
It's
the
Molly
best.
Wobbles.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's really good. That's in a couple chapters.
I will say I generally like that this whole list basically just like calls out everything that people would otherwise consider to be like a plot hole, which I don't know how much I subscribe to. The modern concept of plot holes where just anything that's not explained is now a plot hole.
Yeah, but then there's like the lens of like the magic system in Harry Potter is a plot hole, and I think that's like valid critique.
This does specifically point out like anything that you would be like, well, it would probably be really hard in this situation because of the Imperious Curse or the Polyjuice Potion or whatever. And she does address that right up front. She's like,
It's like,
yep,
hey,
these
is
are all
hard.
the things that make covert warfare especially scary in this particular world.
Yeah.
This is also, I think, laying groundwork for things that are going to happen later, like the Inferi, for example. Like this is the first. Is it the first mention? I don't know,
is,
but
yeah.
it's a very early mention to sort of say this is something that like when you reread it, you're like, oh yeah, they're going to be important later on.
Yeah, even in this book, it's forming a story latch in this book.
Yeah.
In fact.
You're totally right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I have to say, like, I'm looking at the list, and number 6 is, should the dark mark appear over any dwelling place or other building, do not enter. It's like, oh, there's a dark mark. I should go check that out.
It's
People are
giving
nosy.
it's giving CDC COVID regulations.
People
It's
are
like,
so
hey,
nosy.
don't kiss anyone who actively has COVID on the mouth. And it's like, sorry that we have to say that, but we literally do.
Yeah, this is the government not overestimating anybody's intelligence or common
Yeah.
sense.
They're writing for the lowest common denominator of Harry Potter and people like Harry Potter who are not thinking. So now we get to the letter from Dumbledore. It says he's going to come take Harry to the Burrow. And Harry, as a trauma response, is like, I don't believe it. I'm not going to pack. This is too good to be true. Literally nothing good has ever happened to me. And I've always been left here way longer than I thought was necessary.
Yeah, and it's almost like a dream. Like, what a fantasy for him to not really even have to spend the summer with the Dursleys. So I'm going to tell you, I got a 16-year-old. He's just turned 15, 16. So he's
Half-Blood
right.
Prince age.
He's exactly Harry's age.
Yeah.
And although I do agree that there's this psychological component, he didn't want to jinx it by actually packing and then being disappointed. This age boy will do almost anything to avoid doing like packing or putting away laundry
Doing
or
anything.
any kind of task like that. If there's a reason not to or to put it
Yeah.
off, they will do that. And so I was like reading this, I was like, oh, this is so my 16-year-old. This is on point.
We have another one of our hosts has a 15-year-old stepson, and I was like, what if this? Well, we were talking about in the last episode actually, we were talking about Draco's task throughout this book, his task to murder Dumbledore.
Oh my gosh!
And I was like, hey Mary, how would you feel if your stepson was
God
tasked with murdering someone? It's like you can't even make him unload the dishwasher. Like he's not going to murder somebody.
Right, murder's hard.
Murder takes a lot of thinking.
Yeah. Not that I know. But
Yeah,
Of
there's a
course.
lot. I'm marveling at that idea of like,
Yeah.
I mean, there would be no I mean, but I don't know. Draco, I guess we're getting into this, but like Draco has a lot of pressures on him, right? His dad's in prison and like the whole family's, ability to exist is depending on him.
But there's a reason they didn't ask him before, right? I mean, because they could have asked him before, right? But like now maybe those pressures being on him of his dad being in prison, the family, being separated, maybe that's the motivation that, Voldemort sees could really spur him on to actually do it. But which, of course,
but even then, we end up in exactly the situation you would expect, where he procrastinates to the last minute.
Yeah,
they're college professors. You know what that's like.
Yeah.
You can tell the difference between a paper that got written the night before.
So also Draco. The whole premise of that Spinner's End chapter is that Narcissa's like, he's not going to be able to do this.
Yeah,
Are you crazy? He can't do this. And then I like that transition, right? Like, it's like Draco's not going to be able to do this. And then you see Harry's smushed face against the window. Like, this is the kind of kid, this is the age we're talking about here.
Yeah. I do think it's important to like keep doing reality checks on their age, because I think, for example, in the movies, I think in this movie is the one where Draco's like wearing a suit the whole year.
No.
All of the actors are like 20. I think that watching the movie and reading the book to some extent, you forget quite how young they are, because Tom Felton in the movie was like 23. It's like, sure, maybe that guy could kill someone, but like not like your son. You have to think about like the real 16-year-olds, Could they do this? No, they couldn't. They couldn't do any of this.
Right.
They're younger and younger.
And more importantly, you would just never, ever ask them to.
One hopes.
Well.
One hope.
Gosh, yes.
So right at 11, the streetlight outside the house goes out and Harry awakes suddenly. Dumbledore is walking up the path and Harry's like, shit.
Just throwing things in his trunk.
I love how this parallels, like, this is the last time that Dumbledore is with Harry, and he's picking Harry up at the Dursleys with the put outer. And the first time that he was at the Dursleys, he delivered him with the put outer. I like the symmetry of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do also feel that the author was like, that put outer. Wait a second, I have an idea for the next book. Oh, shit. I need to put it in this book.
Reintroduce it. Remind him.
So Harry also forgot to warn the Dursleys that Dumbledore was coming. A great idea. I get it. I get why he wouldn't want to say anything to the Dursleys ever. It's because of trauma. It's because he's abused there. But then we start this very funny exchange where Harry runs downstairs and Dumbledore's at the door and Vernon is like, what the fuck? And Dumbledore's like, let us assume you've warmly invited me into your home.
No. Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of zingers. There's a lot of really polite zingers.
He's in rare form here, I have to say.
Truly.
Like, he's very, like, I feel like he's angry. And there's a way, I think it's a little projection, because he was definitely doing the wrong thing at the end of the last book and had to admit that he should have been more forthcoming.
He admitted it.
Perhaps.
He admitted it for like 25 pages.
So polite to Harry. So polite to Harry.
Yeah.
And
you're right.
And he's really angry about how Harry has been treated by these people who were supposed to take care of him. And he masks it with that early politeness. And honestly, if the Dursleys had the mask of civility and hospitality, I think it would have been, but of course we know they can't do that.
No.
Yeah,
Not with
like
Dumbledore at 11 o'clock at night.
They've been shocked into rudeness.
Well, and the parallel to this chapter is the chapters in book 2, The Worst Birthday and Dobby's Warning, where, because, 2 and 6 are like ring friends, in terms of the ring cycle. And they are spending the entirety of the top of that first chapter working out their fake politeness to the Masons, right? And so they're practicing their fake politeness in order to get this deal through so they can buy a vacation house in Mallorca. And so they've got their script going on, and Dudley's talking about writing an essay about Mr. Mason for school, and like,
oh my God,
it's
that's
just
so stupid.
Ridiculous. And they are absolutely frozen in who they really are in this chapter. And Dumbledore's so super polite. He's just dripping with politeness, but it's sincere.
Yeah.
It's very sincere.
Now, Emily, you have to tell us about the Agapanthus.
Oh my God.
Because
yeah.
Dumbledore comes in. Oh, am I jumping
real quick
ahead?
before we get there? I would like to ask Emily, can you? I think that you said the ring theory, and I think that you're talking about a theory that was recently presented to me, but I've never heard it called that. Can you describe the ring theory?
Absolutely, as best I can. So I did not. This was definitely did not originate with me. So really, the originator of this is John Granger, who was long the Hogwarts Professor website. I think he has a Substack now.
Oh yeah, and I know who that is because Granger.
Right. It's no relation.
Yeah,
no relation.
I remember that person.
So John, not everybody loves John's work, but his work is really actually very foundational in Harry Potter studies. So you just have to give him props for that. But the ring theory says that the whole series and each individual book work in a kind of what we call in biblical studies, we call it a chiastic structure. So there's parallelisms between the first chapter and the last chapter, the second chapter and the second to last chapter, the third chapter and the third to last chapter. And and if you go through the books and look for these parallelisms, they're everywhere.
And at the center is a
shocking.
turning point.
Right.
That's unique.
There's this turning point exactly that gets you kind of to the next stage of the story. That's like the literally pivotal moment, and it brings you through. And so then not only does each book work like that, but then the entire series works like that. So I remember just instinctively, because of what's in the book, I love this book, by the way. This is probably one of my favorite Harry Potter books.
Same.
And it's because it's just so funny and like the rom-com is out of control.
I love it.
And then it's also so serious and so dark. Like it's just, and you're like, I am set for this last book.
It's giving YA everything.
I know. I love the teenagery parts.
Totally
Yeah.
is. But the minute I finished it, I immediately went and grabbed book 2. And started reading book 2 because I was like, what are these Horcruxes? I need to know how a Horcrux behaves. I need to know what this is. And the only information I have about it is Riddle's diary, right? So so there's so many parallels, and like the way the role Ginny plays and the role Ginny plays in book 6, and like it's just there's so many parallels. Yeah, it's crazy. So if you want to read more about that, John Granger has written a whole lot about that.
Amazing.
And there's if you just Google like Harry Potter and ring theory, like you'll come up with a lot of cool stuff on that to digest.
Yeah. So for someone who talks as much as I do about Harry Potter, I'm not like very aware of the scholarship that's been done around it or the fandom work that's been done around it. Like I'm kind of a dodo who just has read Harry Potter 30 times. So I love hearing about this stuff. So I only learned about that theory maybe a couple weeks ago here on the pod. But I never heard the term the ring theory, and it's so fascinating because I'm especially thinking about books like 1 and 7, how like book 1 is just like an opening and book 7 is just like a closing. You know what I mean? And they really do. Okay, maybe we'll do like a whole bonus episode about this because I'm like grasping my hair with like brain working really hard right now.
Well, and ancient authors used to use that kind of structure to tell their stories because it's circular in nature and circles are very spiritual and point to like infinite beings like God, right?
Okay.
And so they did it as a kind of a testimony to God and a way of kind of expressing truths about the divine life. And so it particularly works well with Harry Potter because I think that the author is also using her story to also, of course I'm a religion scholar, so I'm going to think that, right? To a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But
I think there's an unconscious poetics to it also in the sense that when you're reading it, even if you're not conscious that you're going back through everything in reverse in the second half, you do intuit it and it makes it feel complete in a way, and that's why the book series feels complete, exactly like you said, Christina.
Wow. I'm going to have to do some reading and some thinking about this one because a lot, like most books, like fiction these days, you have like most fiction has like a halfway crazy thing that happens. That's just like how plot works. But it usually doesn't like then turn around and go back the way it came. It usually just like goes somewhere else. You know what I mean? So I think I will probably try to work in a bonus episode about that because my brain is going. But
yeah, you could say a lot about it too.
Yeah.
There's tons.
But for now, it's time to talk about the agapanthus.
Oh, the agapanthus.
The flourishing agapanthus.
Dumbledore invites himself in and compliments the Dursleys' agapanthus, which I'm going to Google a picture right now. I don't even know what this is.
It's sometimes called, what did you say, Nile lily, Katie? Is that what?
Lily of the Nile.
Yeah, lily of the Nile. It's like a blue lily. It's very pretty.
It is very pretty.
But when he says, and pardon me, I'm going to turn a page here.
Well, and I have to say, like, Emily, when you first brought it up, like, when I read it, I was just like, oh, she picked that because it's funny, right? Agapanthus. Your agapanthus are flourishing, right? And it's just a funny, she likes words that sound funny. But then you hear that it's the lily of the Nile, and you're like, Lily?
Well, right, exactly. And that's a parallelism with Lily. And there's always, Petunia and Lily are foils for each other and foil characters. And Petunias are thought to be kind of a bitter Lily, like a kind of a, there's a bitterness to a Petunia as opposed to the purity of the Lily, which is why both of those are appropriate. But agapanthus, and I really think I heard this on a podcast at some point because it's stuck in my brain. But I couldn't find the source of what I heard a commentator say, but I was Googling agapanthus, and there's apparently a myth about them in terms of gardening that if you neglect them and starve them, they will flourish anyway. And that's a super interesting way to interpret his compliment as a complete dig.
It's a diss.
Then it's like solidified and confirmed in what he says to them later.
Oh my God, it's like your Harry Potters are flourishing. It's like
yeah. Like thanks to you. No thanks to you. Your agapanthus are flourishing.
Yeah, Lily's son is flourishing amid your neglect.
I mean, he says later on, he calls them out. We'll get there, but he calls them out for exactly what they've done, which is neglect and literally starve this child constantly. And in the parallel chapter, Petunia tells him if he doesn't do all these tasks, he won't eat until he's, And so, like, it's a literal starvation that they do to him. And then later on, Dumbledore in this chapter finally gets a chance to call them out for what they didn't do for Harry.
Thank God. And we're gonna talk
it's
about
satisfying.
that when it comes up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and
that's so wild because, like, I would never have Googled that. Like, Dumbledore mentions random things. I remember, like, learning the word and not really learning it because I still don't know how to say it. But the bougainvillea, right? You guys know that flower?
Yeah, but I don't know how to look.
I don't know how to say it
either.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned that word from this book series. At some point in the previous 5 books, they've mentioned that. And but this one has meaning, and it would never have occurred to me to Google it. But
all
it's like
have meaning.
so steeped in meaning.
Any flower has meaning in these books.
if she mentions
what is the
particular
bougainvillea
plant-
about?
I don't know. What Bee
should
Groves would
Google
know. You guys are aware of Beatrice Groves. She's an Oxford lecturer who writes about Harry Potter, and she writes
She did
on
the Austen episode.
Yeah, that was her.
Yeah, okay. Awesome.
She'll know if that has a meaning. She'll have her thumb on it because she is amazing like that.
That's
So
really cool.
We'll have to ask Bee.
Yeah. I'm like, I Googled like bougainvillea Harry Potter. Googling stuff live on the show doesn't often work out in my favor. So Dumbledore, Harry Potter, Petunia, Vernon, and Dudley all sit down for like a cute little chat.
Well, no, because Dumbledore has to make them sit down, right?
Yeah.
He says, I'll assume you've invited me in, right? And then
Like,
they
I'll
won't
assume we're
sit.
going to the sitting parlor. Like,
Right.
I'm going to assume you're going to join me.
It reminds me of the beginning of Order of the Phoenix during the hearing when he just swoops in and he's like making all these accusations, and Umbridge just like, surely you're not accusing us, the ministry, of like having condoned this like Dementor behavior. And he's like, of course not. I'm sure you're already doing an investigation about this. Like, he really has a way of walking into a conversation and being immediately in total control.
He is the boss. I read this chapter and I was like, this is Dumbledore full on boss.
Yeah.
He's pretending to be polite and courteous and all that. And he is just doing everything. And that's why I think, like, with the Agapanthus, like, he came in hot. He was not really expecting this to go well. And he just owns every minute of it.
And Vernon even says, the narrative even says, Vernon looked as if he saw this guy and thought, this is not somebody I'm going to be able to bully. You know,
Yes.
and it's like, God, I love that because I do feel
He's a
like
bully.
there's some people that give off a vibe that makes bullies take a step back. And it's like, can we bottle that?
I know.
Pass that
That'd be
around.
nice.
But I also think that's just so earned. I love his characterization in this chapter. It's the actual moment where you just realize why he's such a good headmaster of Hogwarts. Because imagine you're like a kid just like causing trouble and you get sent to this dude's office. He's going to be like, I'm sure you didn't intend to set off dung bombs in the hall. Right? You know what I mean? Like those kinds of, like, you could see how this like way of speaking is built on having been a teacher and subsequently a headmaster for so many decades.
Right, who
and then we
stays in
see-
control.
We see in this book also, like, you know, with young Tom Riddle, like he's also having to do this with him as a bully also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am kind of still laughing about the Agapanthus comment because I'm just thinking about how that wasn't for anyone but him. He's just sitting there giggling by himself about that.
Yeah.
He's like, that was a pretty good
That's right.
one, Albus.
Yeah. He's amusing
If I
himself
do
this
say
whole
so.
time.
Yeah.
So I love the line where Vernon says, I don't mean to be rude. And Dumbledore chimes in. And yet, accidental rudeness happens far too often or whatever it is. You know,
Yeah, I'm
I
going to keep
love
that
it.
one in my pocket for when I need it.
Same. Well, I mean, and like
Such a-
it can be
such a burn.
applied to rudeness, but it can also be applied to racism. Like at the minute somebody starts saying, I'm not racist, but it's like,
my God,
whoa.
It's like, that is such a cool intention to set out with, but unfortunately, racism does accidentally happen all the time. So what were you going to say? What were you going to say?
You want to
move
put
on.
the filter on.
Instead of letting you finish that, we're just going to move on.
And he like full on is just like, yeah, so you just should shut up instead of saying whatever it was you were about to say.
Like, Dumbledore's like, I'm not here to actually listen. I'm here to handle something. Yeah. So Dumbledore, like, he's going like full Fantasia. Like, he gets the couch to sweep up the Dursleys. They all sit down. We notice Dumb's blackened hand at this point.
Yeah.
Well, that'll probably not come up again.
Real quick before we get there, I just want to note that he introduces himself to Aunt Petunia and to Dudley, which I think is an important point because we realize that they've never met before. They've only corresponded, which would be a grand total of perhaps 2 letters.
It's exactly 2 letters.
Well, but I
Actually-
love it because I think Emily and I, we got twin minds. Because remember, we find out later that Petunia wanted to go to Hogwarts and she wrote a letter to Dumbledore and he wrote her a probably gentle but firm no.
It was kind because Lily and Snape saw
Yeah.
it and they said it was kind.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
And
you're
yet
totally
He's like,
right.
we've
Holy
corresponded.
shit.
And that was him. And that's him like owning Petunia. Right?
Yeah,
Like,
we
I
have
love it.
corresponded, right? He does. He
Right.
keeps it totally vague, like not I've written to you before, but we have corresponded, of course, right? Throughout your entire life, girl. You know, like
right.
like, I
Vernon
know
doesn't
you.
know that.
right.
Vernon
And
doesn't
Harry
know.
even the Harry influenced narrator even says, you know, that's a kind of a funny way to refer to the fact that he sent her an exploding letter. Well, that's because he's not referring to only that.
He's
referring
literally
to
not
their,
referring to that.
which is like probably only 3 letters throughout the course of their existence, but like it's still 3.
But
you know,
It's
she
Dumbledore
initiated
being
it.
like, it's Dumbledore being like, girl, sit down. Like, I've known you since you were a wee little lass begging to come to my school. Like, sit the fuck down.
Right. Yeah.
And then he gets the couch to come do that.
And also realistically reminding her that his presence in her house would not have been unwelcome for a
Right.
huge chunk of her life. That
So
it-
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool. So, we noticed Dumbledore's black in hand. We'll get to that later, maybe. He pours everyone some mead. Everyone present. That's a good idea.
Mead is very low alcohol.
I was gonna
I don't
say
know,
that's
man.
like a
I don't know, man. I've gotten pretty shit-faced off some mead. Like, the hippies.
They're 16. They're 16. Like in Europe,
It's-
that's normal.
It's the UK. They're loosey-goosey with that stuff.
It just feels like he's coming in being the cool grandpa, like, hey, you can do it as long as it's in the living room and I'm
Yes.
here.
Like, there's no reason why this wasn't tea, you know? Like,
Right. Although it's Dumbledore. So I feel like it's on brand for him. He's like, come on, let's drink. You know?
Mead, isn't it? Mead is a honey beverage, right? And Dumbledore's Bumblebee.
Oh, that's a great point. That's a great point.
I was going to say also it kind of reinforces that Harry is coming close to adulthood. It's giving him an adult beverage in a situation where he's about to inherit a house and the responsibility of another life.
Okay. Yeah. I hear all of this, but as this escalates, just imagine you walk into the home of someone and you are not welcome there. And you pour mead for your two hosts and their ward who you are kidnapping and their son. And nobody's drinking it and you start demanding that they drink it. We're not doing that.
This is very rude. I mean, and it does, it veers into, some bullying territory also, but it's so deserved that I do feel it's, more humorous than worrying, but he, does not let up. These little blasts are just hitting the Dursleys.
They're bonking.
Come on, take a drink.
Which, I do think it's funny, but I wish he had left Dudley out of it. Dudley's a kid, and he's not gonna, take a beverage from you right now, dude. Don't do this to him.
I know, but Dudley has been part of the bullying that has occurred to Harry.
He's a child. And as Dumbledore says later in the chapter, he's like, you fucked up this kid way worse than you fucked up Harry by abusing him on purpose. Leave Dudley alone.
Come on,
he
Dudley's
does not
had
have
a lot
to work with.
Dudley got the pigtail. He got the ton coffee.
He's traumatized.
Dudley. And it hasn't made him any better of a person.
No,
although he's gonna turn, in the next book.
He literally is on his arc right now. Yeah. He's on that arc bullshit.
And I was noticing in this chapter, he's not especially badly behaved. We actually don't see bad behavior from him. And when Harry's coming down at the beginning, he makes this comment about stay a little bit far from Vernon because he had learned from experience that he needed to be more than arm's length away
because
from his
he
uncle.
Is being physically abused by Vernon.
Which is trauma.
Fucking little reminder.
Him.
Yeah, and so it's really Vernon and Petunia also who are getting the brunt of it. And this is Dudley. I love how when maybe we're jumping ahead a little bit here, but when he says the bit about you've ruined this one, and Dudley is he's spends the rest of the time trying to figure out how did they abuse me? What could they have possibly done wrong to me?
Yeah,
it's the permissive, indulgent parenting style. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
No.
Wow. You know what? You cannot just have a kitten by itself. You need another cat so that when the kitten gets bit, he's like, oh, getting bit hurts. It's I
gotta mind myself.
Mm-hmm. You gotta tell them no somehow.
Yeah, I need to bite my cat because I just took the one cat. I was like, I don't want to. Sorry.
Oh, Emily, you have to tell them your cat's name also.
My cat is named Weasley. It's amazing. She's not here right now.
She's a ginger.
She's a ginger, and when she was born, there were 3 gingers and. Two were twins, and one was kind of whiter.
There should have been 7.
Should have been 7.
Oh yeah, there should have, but there was only 4. But we didn't know what their sex was, and we didn't know we were just we want one of those, and so we just started calling them Fred and George Weasley, and because they were cute little twinsies, and then we took one home, and so it was a girl, so we just kept the Weasley part and left the rest. But she's a total terror. She's the only Weasley ever to be sorted into Slytherin. But I'm the other cat. She bites me all the time. I have scars because I didn't take a second cat. And so I'm the other cat. So she's just so I guess I should bite her.
You got to bite back. Yeah.
I keep her, more than arm's length away because she's a swiper. She's a swiper.
Sometimes a bully just understands the language of bullying. I think that's what Dumbledore is doing there, really, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's not his best moment, but he's mad.
He's fucking mad.
And the Agapanthus.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna behave poorly in this way, it's gonna be defending someone that I really care about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also kind of making up for the stuff he did really wrong.
Totally
himself.
abandoning him in the last book. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have a question for everyone then, given the context that we've just kind of gone over and the justifications for his behavior, why do we think that he decides to take care of the creature business here and now?
Well, let's get there first to the creature business, if you don't mind. Because the reason we're here is because Sirius's will has been discovered and he left Harry everything he owned. That includes Grimmauld Place. Harry tries to donate it to the Order, but there's a chance that it has been inherited magically. There's like a lot of big inheritance magic happening right now. So like there's a chance that Bellatrix inherited it. But, like, there's also a chance that Harry inherited it. So the way that we test that is to, brief interlude, the meat is really beating up the Dursleys now, okay? The way that we test who owns the house is that they summon creature. Okay. Go,
because creature goes with the house, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the question is, is the house really Harry? I guess you can't just write, I leave this property to my godson. There has to be some kind of magical, and house elves are very much magically bound in the same way that apparently this house is.
Yeah.
Well, and you get a lot of old magic, old families, like it's you wouldn't have this issue, I don't think, with like Seamus's family, which is, or Hermione's family, even though they're magically inherited. You wouldn't have a situation where it's like, oh, well, like, because a wizard lived here, like, that's not the type of magic we're dealing with.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to note, like, it's the type of ancestral magic that runs very deep and is related, again, to the whole concept of what it means to be pureblood. There is a sense of, well, there's deeper magics at play because, we're an old family because the magic runs all the way down. But
Fake.
then also...
Fake.
But the whole reason we're messing with it, right, is because trying to keep that kind of purity, you die out.
Yeah.
And okay, so Emily, do you remember this we'll talk about this later, but we have a book coming out. And one of the chapters in the book is by our technical editor, Emma Nicholson. And she does a deep read on Sirius. And like the Black family is very inbred because they're, trying to be pureblood. Yeah. And this is how it is. They're all related to each other. That Black family tree, like those people are cousins.
But that's how you end up with a King Charles that can't fit his tongue in his mouth, like at the end of the line,
The Habsburgs. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. On our Discord today, Claire said, I would love an episode about the absolute mess that is the sacred 28 family tree. And I think that would be a really fun deep dive. And by fun, I mean
Emma Nicholson.
horrifying.
Yeah,
Okay.
Literally. Call Emma Nicholson. She'd be a great guest for that.
She knows
Yeah.
all that
awesome.
stuff.
Yeah,
Oh
absolutely.
my God.
Yeah.
So what was your question, Brooke? I'm so sorry.
So given all the context, the fact that basically Dumbledore showed up to like make them feel real bad, be a little bit rude, and get the Harry the fuck out of here, why do we think he decides to call creature here and test it here? It's obviously going to be unwelcome. Is that part of it? Does he like doubling down on dropping a house elf in the middle of their living room? Do we think it's because of the protective spell? Like, I couldn't wrap my head around as I was reading it the why here, why now aspect of it.
Yeah, I love this. And I love how, like, creature pops up in Petunia's pristine living room. And he's like this dirty rag. And she's appalled,
Yeah. It said that he's the filthiest thing to be in her house in living memory.
And she was interrupted for this, like, midnight meeting during her apparently nightly kitchen scrub down.
Yeah.
And we don't make fun of the nightly kitchen scrub down. Some very normal podcasters do that too. We call it, my friend, our friend Ashley in the Discord introduced me to the phrase kitchen zero, which is how I like my nights to end, with a cool kitchen zero.
I'm into that as well.
You can come do that at my house if you need a fix.
Yeah, y'all are
fix
not
of
invited
that.
to my kitchen. Y'all can't come. Y'all can't come to my house.
Other people's kitchens don't affect me, but when I go downstairs in the morning and my kitchen is messy, I'm like, who closed last night? Who did this?
Yeah, you know what, Christina, I say that thing about other people's kitchens and other people's houses don't affect me, but it's not true. It's totally not true. They do. I won't let myself react to them, but
You're not allowed to see anything that's not behind me immediately right now. Christina knows what my house looks
it's a
like.
white wall. I like
If that was true of me, Brooke and I just could not be friends.
Yeah, Brooke, you and I, we're on the same page. Like, there are 5 people and 3 cats in my house. Like, I've given up. I don't have any. And I wasn't that
literally-
interested to begin with.
I am literally looking around right now at no less than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stacks of paintings that have yet to be hung up on a wall a year after a move.
You have a baby,
Classic.
though. That is a total excuse for everything. So
I did not have a baby for the most of that time period.
Well, to get back to your question, Brooke, because it's a
Yes.
great question.
Yes.
And I have a narrative structure answer to it, but that's all it is, right? Okay, so
We're editors. We love that.
the narrative structure answer is that in the parallel chapters in book 2, which, as I've said, are chapters 1 and 2, the worst birthday and Dobby's warning. First of all, this whole thing is paralleled in the sense that Dumbledore waltzes in and just starts doing magic left and right. He flicks his wand at least 5 times,
Yeah.
and things result, right? But in book 2, Harry's not even allowed to say the word magic. He threatens Dudley by saying, "Oh, you didn't say the magic word," and Dudley freaks out, and they all yell at him and punish him with tasks for even mentioning magic, which he didn't even do. He was just talking about the word please. So magic is completely banished from their home in that chapter, and in this chapter is being done openly by basically the Magic King, right? So then the reason I think that Creature is called Here and Now is because in those chapters in book 2, you have Dobby. You have this really super random visit from Dobby. And he appears in the shrubbery, right? So more plant lore.
Yeah.
And he comes in, and his ownership is to the Malfoys, but his loyalty is to Harry. And of course, it's the opposite with Creature, where Creature's ownership is to Harry, but his loyalty is to the Blacks and to the purebloods. And so you have this flip, you have this reversal. And Dobby is acting to try to protect Harry. Creature doesn't care. But Harry has to act in order to protect the Order of the Phoenix to continue to have Creature in his service. So there's a lot of house elf flippy floppy going on that serves the narrative structure across the series.
Yeah, and if I could chime in with like Dumbledore, like what would Dumbledore's motivation be? Like what could possibly he be thinking to do this? Besides like, I got to go to Horace Slughorn's next and I just got to get wipe this thing out right first.
Yeah.
But like what would be his thinking? Okay, so Harry's godfather, Sirius Black, has died. And Sirius and the threat of his mass murderer godfather was what was keeping the Dursleys in check somewhat with Harry in the past. And so, like, obviously the Dursleys are surprised, like, he's dead, right? But Dumbledore doesn't necessarily know that. But just in case that's going to be a problem, then he's got this other thing. He talks about how much wealth Harry has. Harry has his own house, right? And, then he's later going to try to make sure that Harry can come back to the Dursleys one more time because of the magic, but he wants them to know Harry has a house, Harry has money, and Harry actually himself has control over this other being. And Dumbledore is pretty sure it's going to go the way that it goes, that it does belong to him, because Sirius, he's not new to wizard and old magic. But I think that he's doing it partly, again, as a way to show the Dursleys that Harry is not without resources.
Right.
And that strikes me as maybe a motivation, that helps you understand like the narrative that I do think is what Emily said, I think is exactly right as well.
Yeah. Wow. Brooke, did you have any thoughts about that?
No, big ol' empty brain, but that's why I asked.
That's why we asked. I also feel like Creature just like shit talks a lot, and like, I don't know, let him shit talk to the Dursleys instead of the Weasleys.
Yeah, my only thing was I thought there's an element of shock value to it, which obviously he gets. Like, he's trying to get a rise out of them, right? He's sat there, he's clinking them in the head persistently with glasses. And,
and Creature thinks they're horrible, right? Creature thinks muggles are dirt beneath his feet. And so it's kind of funny to see that, the two prejudices intersecting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're both house elves are super loud. Also, in both of the chapters, they're intolerably loud, right?
Yeah.
And so,
which is such an interesting thing to insert into the house elf lore, because they're, unseen, unheard for the first few books. And then for the first book. And then in the second book, you meet the house elf for the first time. And they are loud and I would say self-aggressive. They're not necessarily actually aggressive, but they're certainly self-aggressive. It's such a huge presence. And every subsequent house elf we meet is a huge presence. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how did were we just too young to notice this? Is it because we didn't grow up in a house with a house elf? Like, as a perspective, it just seems insane that they are the level of personalities that all the house elves have, that they go unnoticed at all, ever.
Mm-hmm. And
you're right about that.
They're very powerful too. And that's one of the things that I think is, and I pointed that out in the essay that I wrote too, like they have power. They have a lot of power. Look at all the mischief that Dobby creates trying to prevent Harry from going to Hogwarts. And then all the stuff Creature does. Creature's able to find the loophole. And Winky is such an enabler for Barty Crouch Jr. And they have a lot of power. And so, the fact that they are in bondage is so, I think it's one of those things, it's such a conundrum that it makes you go back and think about it. And that's one of the things I like about it. Like, that's like Quidditch too, right? It's like, how does my brain make this up, make this work? And, one of the things that I find kind of tricky, right? I think, Dumbledore is being a bully and he's bullying bullies. But I don't like the bullying, but it's bullying bullies, right? And do I find that funny? Do I not? And then there's Creature, who has proved himself to be a betrayer, and he's responsible for Sirius's death, and Harry's right to be really angry at him. But Creature's like not a free being and is totally miserable. And like when he tells Creature, shut up, it's so satisfying. It's so satisfying, but it's also kind of horrible because then Creature's like choking on the floor. And I feel
like the Matrix moment. Do you remember in the Matrix when his like mouth disappears?
Right. And so I feel like when I'm reading it, both of those, I'm of twin minds about it in the sense that I kind of like it. I kind of am like, this is really wrong.
You're like Hermione, right? Don't you see how sick it is that they have to obey?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But going back to the mirror thing, I do think that also mirrors this chapter in Chamber of Secrets, because it's like you want to fuck up the dinner party, but you like don't want Harry to get in trouble. So it's like, this is awesome, but this is also the worst thing that could be happening right now.
Right. Right.
There's also just such a weird, like, and maybe this is just my personal context, but there's such a weird, like, military undertone that I pick up in this in terms of, like, the idea of an informant or someone that was previously in a circle knowing too much to be able to earn freedom. They have forfeited freedom by virtue of their association with this group that they were not asked to be in, that was not voluntary at any point, and now because of an involuntary involvement, they're even further removed from the idea of freedom or the possibility of freedom.
Yeah, Sirius should have dismissed him immediately upon getting back to Grimmauld Place.
But, like, would Creature have allowed himself to be dismissed? And Creature knows too much already, maybe. It's a very difficult kind of situation.
Totally. His knowledge of the fact of Sirius's existence for a minute there was very juicy secret.
Yeah. And what does Dobby say? It's like, it's hard out there for a free house elf. Right? Something like that.
They can always go to Hogwarts, which is luckily what Creature ends up doing anyway. And I don't say luckily because he is switching from being enslaved by one person to being enslaved by like a different person. But luckily because we know that it is at least like a good environment for this kind of situation, and they do have the option to receive payment.
So I was thinking about the title of the chapter, Will and Won't, and it obviously refers to the will and testament of Sirius Black, but I was thinking about will in the sense of having power over yourself. Yeah. Will and won't, and like Creature's like won't, but it's Dumbledore's and Harry's will that prevails, and there's something really bad about that.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
Well, especially because in the moment that these are two of our primary heroes in this narrative. You trust Harry, you maybe trust Dumbledore a little bit less because of last book.
The whole last book.
Right. But you truly believe in their goodness. And this whole chapter is them behaving not so good. And so that's with the Dursleys, and that's also with Creature, right? And Creature's a tougher nut to crack there. It's a more muddled situation. But it is the books get darker as they progress, noticeably so. And we're at a point in the narrative where our heroes are thoroughly tarnished. And it's something that I think is such a bold choice when you remember that this is a children's series. The fact that we're not even in the final book. This isn't the moment where our heroes have like fallen and now they're going to make a choice to redeem themselves. This is just a logical progression of character development that has made our heroes more and more human and more naturalistically flawed as we've progressed throughout this series.
Yeah, and the embodiment of that is Dumbledore's hand, right? Mm-hmm. It shows that, that imperfection.
The decay. Oh my God, like quite literally tarnished. Mm-hmm. So the fact that when Harry tells Creature to shut up, he does, it means that Harry has effectively inherited Grimmauld Place.
And Creature. And he's like, I don't want him.
Yeah, he's like, ew, do I have to keep him? And Dumbledore's like, hard no, send him to Hogwarts. It's like, fine, I guess.
But also so sad for, I guess, Creature, that like the first order he gets from Harry, who does have some sense of compassion for house elves as a species, is shut
more
up.
Than it seems like the rest of the magicians.
Yeah. I mean, I know he doesn't intend it to be a command, but for that to be the moment that he's taking possession of a living being.
Well, and look at it this way. His first two commands are shut up and fuck off.
Yeah.
Right. And you're not allowed to live in your house anymore.
Mm-hmm. Which is bananas. Like, Creature
right. What
just
about his nest?
Too old for that. What about his nest?
Such an awesome nest.
His gross nest and his weird attic of secrets.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's very hard. Like, especially if you think about
with
slavery. That's bad.
If anything, like, send it back to Grimmauld Place and be like, I don't know, clean? Like, I don't know, man. I don't know what the answer. The answer is, and I feel this way strongly, is to not have house elves in your story. That's like the way that I'll be satisfied. Because
what would we talk about?
I don't think that whatever this is like a metaphor for, like, I don't feel like it's handled elegantly. I feel like I think the author really has a habit of being like, look at this fucked up thing. Isn't that fucked up? I found it. And it's like, hey, girl, you invented this species just to subjugate them. Like, I don't know why we had to do this.
But I can't, I have to, like, the thing with Dobby and his arc at the end in book 7, like, that, to me, that's the whole book, is Dobby becoming independent, liberated, thinking for himself, in the sense that he does it not because he's been ordered to save Harry and his friends, but because he wants to. And to me, God, that's just such a powerful expression of self-actualization and coming into your own power as an independent being. Dobby's a free elf.
And not only that, Katie, but then Ron coming to the realization, partly because of what Dobby does and the witness that Dobby gives them of freedom and of self-sacrifice. Somebody like Ron, he's like totally takes all this stuff for granted. Like, never even heard anybody say anything against the whole practice of house elf enslavement, coming to the realization that they cannot ask the house elves to fight for them because they will, and they'll all throw themselves at the enemy and they'll all die, and how sick that is, that they have to, and becoming, crossing that line of consciousness and of self-awareness and of empathy, because it's about empathy. It really is about empathy. All these stories, building off of what Katie did with house elves as housewives. I published an article about house elves, the reading of house elves as robots, like created servants, like Christina, what you just said about you created these to subjugate them. Well, that's true. And robots in stories, in science fiction stories, are these created servants. And it's us humans playing with this idea of like, well, what if we made them to serve? Would that be okay? And it's still not. It's still not. And so I really think, as much as they're problematic and people, recoil from them in a lot of discussion of Harry Potter, I just think the books would be so much less rich without their witness, as long as you're willing to take it as a witness and not just take it as like the way Ron does for 6.5 books.
Yeah, and it's not all fixed at the end. Like, I like that it's not all fixed at the end, and I like things that are problematic and that you could talk about and be angry about.
I would not have this podcast if this wasn't a problematic series.
That's right. Well, and I'm a historian, right? So, there's nothing
is there
ever
problematic stuff in history? I didn't know.
You know, well, not the way some people want you to learn history, but
no,
but that's
no
the
indoctrination, no indoctrination.
Right. That's the boring stuff. That's why nobody likes history in elementary school, because you don't get the real stuff, and it's awful, and it's interesting, and it's not the way you think it should go, and that's what I think is worth talking about.
Yeah. I'll never forget my favorite history teacher of all time was this really nice, warm mom type in college who just sat on her stool and like told us a story every week. You know what I mean? Instead of, it's like, let me tell you like something, let me get you to care with like this narrative arc of like what happened.
Well, history has a narrative arc.
Teachers don't always teach it that way, though.
The worst pedagogical choice that we've made as a society is making history primarily about dates for the first, 6 years you learn it.
I'm not a numbers person. Numbers do not stay in my head. Tell me a story, though. I'll remember that.
Right. I like timelines. I like to see how it all fits together. Like, I don't care about the date. I just want to know what happened first and then what happened, you know? And it's a fascinating way to look at anything. We keep bringing up Emma Nicholson, our technical editor, but she's so awesome because she has this approach to looking at the text that she wants to set up these timelines and she wants to look at the events of the story in terms of their context amongst themselves, you know.
Because there's so much happening in this story.
There's so much. And then comparing someone's timeline to another character's timeline and then looking at what's going on when these events take place and what this person is going through. It's a really fascinating approach to history.
You read about the history of the wizarding world totally out of order, right? Yeah. So what happens if then you put it back in the order? What do you understand that you don't when you're just getting flashbacks and snippets and, you're sort of getting this story about Dumbledore and Grindelwald, and where does that, what if you told that in the right order?
Well, and additionally, in this book, we get the first tie-in of contextual timeline for the Muggle world that this is happening kind of enveloped inside of with the introduction that we're given with the Prime Minister. We're reconnected to the fact that this is the yolk of the egg. You know what I mean? There's a whole universe happening around it that isn't necessarily even aware fully of the events that are occurring.
Yeah, totally. So, Creature's gone. He's gone to work at Hogwarts. We also talk about Buckbeak quickly. Hagrid's got him. Let's leave him with Hagrid. He goes by Witherwings now.
That's hot.
Although I love how Dumbledore's like, I don't think the ministry officials will recognize him.
Also, absolutely just gotta say, Hagrid didn't pick that name, huh? That's a Dumbledore name? Witherwings? I don't think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, why don't we call him Witherwings?
So Hagrid would have named him Greg. 100% would have been Greg.
Yeah, you're right about that. So Harry goes to finish packing and leaves Dumbledore and the Dursleys alone together.
Yes. Very important point I just want to throw out is one of the things he's seen to be packing is a jar of color-changing ink. Cauldron of color-changing quill ink. And I love everything about that from my, 15 going on 16-year-old self getting the multicolor changing pens as gel pens, and stuff like that.
Hell yeah.
It was just a nice moment where I was like, oh yeah, this takes place in the 90s. You know what I mean?
Color changing ink. That's when I had that nail polish where if I went out in the sun, it would turn a different color.
Yes.
They kept that from me, I think.
Oh my God.
Must have.
It's a miracle.
I loved that stuff when I was
See,
a kid.
I thought immediately of highlighters. I was like, this is wizarding highlighting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Because,
or marking up. Not that Harry does that. That's my show.
Harry editing his essays.
No hard no.
I'm like, yeah, whose ink is this? Is this Hermione's ink? Because why do you need this?
Unless it's like responsive ink. What if it's like spell check ink? It changes colors if you did it wrong. It just turns red. It's like, you gotta scratch that out, my man.
Well, I think they do have quills that do that. He's got the double layers of protection. It's like using Grammarly and then using like Microsoft Word spell check. It's
Yeah,
like,
all of it.
I'm not going to get this wrong. When Harry comes back down into the living room, Dumbledore is just like humming contentedly.
Yeah, right.
Very pleased.
Amusing himself.
Basically, Dumbledore turns to the Dursleys and is like, fuck you guys.
Yep.
Like, you're extremely abusive. Not that Dumbledore ever did a damn thing about it, but I guess he's doing it now.
Yeah, he's doing it now because Harry is
Yeah.
not Agapanthus.
Well, also though, like, this is the moment where Harry, as we talked about earlier, has enough autonomy that he just needs to re-up the spell and get out of there. Like, I know the Weasleys have been kind of ostensibly able, right, to take, or willing to take him in up to this point, but it's a financial burden on them, right? And like, as much as they try to play it off, it is a huge thing to take a kid for a whole summer. That's a lot of effort. It makes Ron harder to deal with as well.
So what I'm saying is not give Harry to the Weasleys. What I'm saying is you waited 15 years to come be like, hey, I know you're not treating him right.
But do you really think it would have helped? Like, at best,
You
the
can't
wizarding
not try.
at
It's
best
a
the
child.
wizarding world has instilled fear in them of getting caught, but it hasn't really changed anything to this point. They've had multiple incidences that should have done that.
I wonder, like, it seems like Dumbledore, like, at the end of book 5 is when he really acknowledges that Harry didn't come out of the Dursleys totally whole and well. And maybe he just didn't acknowledge it to himself because he needed Harry to be there for the magical protection that the house
Right.
has for him.
It was just one more thing for him to worry about. But wasn't there some, okay, I don't know exactly when this happened, but at one point he got sent mail from Hogwarts that was labeled Cupboard Under the Stairs.
Yeah, that's the first book.
And
Yeah.
well, then after that, they move him into the spare bedroom, into Dudley's second bedroom.
Yeah.
And so they felt the critique of that.
Yeah.
So
And
there
things are
was that.
better. Yeah, there are things, but yeah, and I think also now I'm thinking about like those articles that we talked about in the beginning of the chapter. There's actually like a security problem with leaving Harry with the Dursleys, given all this Death Eater action that's going on, and Muggles are not immune to this. And so I think that Dumbledore is sort of weighing the magical protection of the Dursleys' house with knowing what's up and knowing the Death Eater threat and, having your 8 ways to combat the problem from the
Right.
government. And that he's sort of thinking now maybe, is a good time to move Harry more into the wizarding world.
Okay. That tracks for me that he, first of all, didn't even start to think about it until the last book.
Yeah, I'm not letting Dumbledore off the hook with that because obviously Dumbledore, and he admits it, like in book 5, that he did the wrong. He's done kind of the wrong thing, but he's always, he's like the mastermind, and he's got to get his pawns to be in formation, and sometimes he has to like leave them out there for a while. And unfortunately, I think Harry got caught in that, and that's one of the less admirable parts of Dumbledore.
Sure. Using Harry as a pawn is definitely one of his lesser qualities.
What is it? Snape says like a pig for slaughter or whatever.
Straight up. Yeah.
Snape dealing some hard truth there.
We also get, I'm going to comment on ring theory because I just learned about it, but I picked something up, so I'm going to pat myself on the back.
Do it.
We have an open discussion of the fact that it's Harry's birthday and the relation of Harry's birthday to Dudley's birthday, which in that second book, we've got that worst birthday ever chapter. And we get the admission from Petunia that she knows actually exactly when Harry's birthday is. And that they've just been openly ignoring it until it becomes relevant. But it's so weird as well, again, that she's like, well, no, he's not an adult yet. And he's like, we do this differently in our world. And also, like, what does it matter to you? Do you want him back for another summer?
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those moments where we get just a little bit of a flaking from Petunia of that relationship to her sister. Because they had kids at the same time. Being pregnant is hard. Having a newborn is hard. The idea of having a sister to go through that with you that you can't talk to, you can't access, you can't commiserate with is, I mean, that's a formative event, you know, and that's probably was traumatic for both of them, actually. I'm sure she was sitting there awake with Dudley in the middle of the night, wishing she could call her sister.
But she couldn't because Lily's not allowed to have a telephone.
Well, and also, she died, you know?
Yeah,
we don't know exactly how little Harry was when all of this happened.
Well, and then the regret that she didn't call, you know, that she didn't, you know, make contact with her because of these views that she fostered in herself, that what the magic is unnatural and freakish, and only because of her own feelings of rejection from the wizarding world.
And then she marries a man who reinforces those and backs up that idea.
Oh my God, he's like a magic black hole. It's like any magic in the room, he just like sucks it away.
Right. Magic and imagination. He's an imagination black hole,
He's
right?
like he's just like a horrible lump of a man. Basically, Dumbledore's like, Harry's going to come back here one more time before he comes of age, and I'm watching you. Like, don't. Just don't. After that, he's going to be a full-fledged magician. Like, don't. Just don't. Will and won't and don't.
Yeah, and I do like that he just finally hauls off on them. You never treated Harry, you know, as a son. And, you know, I like they just needed to be told off. And it's very satisfying to have that happen at the end of all of this, like the cups hitting them in the head and the, you know, the chair swooping under them. And it's like, yeah, you did not do the right. And he's just real direct about it. And all right, time to go.
And scene. Yeah, and it's interesting that, you know, I mean, obviously this is lost on Vernon. We don't know what effect it has on Dudley, maybe some, but, you know, on page, what is that, 56, it says Aunt Petunia, however, was oddly flushed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's having some effect on her, right?
She hears him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she does, and she feels the regret of rejecting her sister and the whole wizarding community, and over time, and in the cruelest way, her sister's only child, right?
Yeah. I'm just giggling because of Harry as the narrator. It's like, that's odd. And it's like, bro, think about it for 2 seconds. Oh my God.
Could there be stuff you don't know?
Oh my gosh. This is my 16-year-old too. Oh my gosh. Read the room.
So it is time to leave. Dumbledore sends Harry's things to the Burrow. They're going to do a side quest. Except the invisibility cloak. We're going to need that one. And then the chapter ends with, and now, Harry, let us step out into the night and pursue that flighty temptress adventure.
If ever there were a Harry Potter tattoo worth getting.
Yeah, but the adventure is Horace Slughorn. I don't know, man.
Yeah, but like John Muir in context ain't a peach either. You know, people love quoting him on his adventure bits.
But like Dumbledore's kind of bringing in Harry as almost an equal in this quest. Like it is like we're two bros adventuring together now, right? And so it is kind of exciting. I love the end of that chapter. Like I love a chapter that's not, it does not allow you to stop reading. Like, like it's like, oh, must go on to the next one. What is this adventure? Yeah, even if it's Horace Slughorn. We don't know that.
And he is fun. He is a very fun character. So it's not like I'm displeased to meet him.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of part of why I love this book so much is because I love Slughorn so much, and he's just so like I know people like this.
I know,
like
it's
I
a
know
very real character.
A couple people who are just like they want to be name droppers because they feel a little insecure, but they really have done some really awesome things, and they shouldn't be. But they let themselves go, and like you know, so just even the fact that they're going out, and then you know when you know what he knows and how he knows it. And the role he may have played, you know, it really is an adventure, you know, that they're stepping out into the night.
Yeah. Well, that is the end of the chapter. Katie, did you have any final thoughts or feelings or anything we missed that you want to circle back to?
No, I mean, when I read this chapter, I was like, how are we going to have this conversation in 1 hour? Because
We did
there's
it.
so
We did it.
much. I know. There's so much. It's a really great, rich chapter that goes in all kinds of different directions. So I just loved it. I love this conversation about it. Really good questions.
And it's pretty short. Like, this is a 12-page chapter in a time when these chapters are like 25 pages. So it was kind of short. And especially when I went into it being like, oh, great, this is like the recap chapter, my expectations were low. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot that this one's way better.
Yeah.
What about you, Emily? Any final thoughts or things that we missed?
I mean, I just have to say Agapanthus one more time because, but I mean, really thematically, I mean, because I think, Katy, you said her chapter titles are always so wonderfully multivalent in terms of their meaning, but will and won't, obviously applies, to the will of Sirius Black and then the won'ts of Creature,
Right.
and the will of Harry and Albus and the will of the Dursleys even. But then it kind of flips into this idea of what her sister, left behind after her death and the will, not that I don't know if there was a will, but having Harry stay with the Dursleys and how they just really refused to love him the way that they loved their own son, the way that they cared for their own son, and the struggle of their will against the will of her sister and Dumbledore himself even. So I think that it is really multivalent in that sense, and it all comes back to that Agapanthus.
Damn. Yeah, and like Lily's will is also her will, you know what I mean? Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Right, and it comes through with Harry, right? He gets that will to just love and to be there and to lay your life down for your friends in the same way that she did for him.
Well, and her willingness to do that is what's protected him and kept this whole thing going for so long.
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's true. Brooke, any final thoughts about the chapter?
No, I am glad to be in this book, honestly. It's
Me
a
too.
lot of
I love
fun.
this one. It's such a huge relief after Order of the Phoenix.
The Order of the Phoenix is a hard one. It's the
Yeah.
only one I haven't reread beginning to end. I've listened to it on tape, but all caps Harry is just tough.
It's a
And
lot.
having lived with a 15-year-old for the last year,
It's too real.
like it's very real. Like I'm not saying it's inaccurate, but that's a hard year.
Yeah.
And it's 16 is better. 16 is better.
Right. I love all of the rom-com shit that we're about to get. Like,
Me
I
too.
love it so much. So let's move on to plugs. Katy, Emily, remind the people where you are on the internet and how they can find you and listen to you.
We are the Potterversity podcast on MuggleNet. So if you go to MuggleNet, we're in the MuggleNet family, and you are invited to listen to all those episodes. We also are just about to put out a companion book that is made up of essays from some of our favorite guests. And Emily and I each have essays in there as well. And lots of really cool stuff there that I think is really in keeping with a lot of what you do on this podcast. Close readings and also call outs, for bad ideas, problematic ideas. And that is probably going to be coming out. That's from McFarlane Press. That'll be coming out in the fall. So I hope everybody will stay tuned for that.
Awesome.
And
What's it called?
it's called Potterversity.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, essays exploring the world of Harry Potter.
Oh, that's so cool. I see it right here on bookshop.org. All links to that is in the show notes, and everything else that they've mentioned is in the show notes.
Great. Yep. And I am online at emilystrand.com. I'm a musician. You can also listen to my music there. And I am on Twitter at, if we're allowed to still say the word Twitter.
You are. You're allowed.
I am
Begrudgingly allowed.
at EKC Strand. And I don't do a whole lot of other social media just because I'm like, I can't learn new things. And then I have my Star Wars book that just came out. I have a Star Trek book from the same publisher that just came out in April. So I know all the nerd things, all the
Emily's
Really?
got a bunch of books. She's been doing a lot of proofing.
Yeah,
That is
I can't see
awesome.
properly anymore. I was like looking at the page number. I was like, literally, I can't read that page number, guys. Like, I need new glasses because there's just been too much staring at a screen, looking for stray formatting and footnotes.
Yes, I can certainly relate to that.
Yeah, and Potterversity also has social media. So please do join us on Potterversity Facebook and Instagram, and we have Twitter, right, Emily?
We do have Twitter.
I don't
Yes.
do the I don't do the Twittering.
Laurie
Twittering
Beckoff,
is not for me, but-
our producer, handles the social media, most of the social media, and I think Emma helps as well. So Laurie is very good about making our presence felt on those.
And we love to hear
Yeah.
from people too. So
Yeah, a lot of times we read emails from listeners on the show. So I think
and we get ideas. People are like, we want an episode about this. And we do
Ooh,
it.
love when the listeners just tell me what to cover.
Yeah, please.
exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Katy, what is something that you've been reading or watching or listening to or playing or thinking about lately that you think the listeners of our podcast would enjoy?
Cool. Well, so, I am working on a Princess Bride thing right now. So I'm doing a lot of stuff with that. And that, if you haven't read the book, The Princess Bride, you should totally read it. The movie, of course, is wonderful, but the book is really interesting. And I think, some of those elements of fantasy and magic are really cool there. And Harry Potter people would probably like it. And the humor, there's a similar sense of humor.
Yeah.
And the book is just like the film in terms of the humor.
Yeah.
And
I have the only book I've ever had that has a fold out map is my mass market paperback edition of The Princess Bride. The map folds out so you can refer to it while still reading. It's incredible.
That is phenomenal.
My first time reading it, I aggressively Googled how to get the unabridged version, thinking that was a real thing.
Yeah, and he actually did have you could write into something, and then later it was on online, and you would get a form letter back. I mean, there was some thing that in the 1980s you could do.
That's crazy.
So it's really cool. It's a whole fun series there. So I was thinking about in terms of films that I like, and I did a paper where I compared Harry Potter and the film Kubo and the Two Strings. And if you haven't watched that, delightful. I love it. There's something really interesting about it. And I had a whole Mirror of Erised thing going on with that.
Cool.
And I think I think those people wanted to rewrite the end of Harry Potter and have some redemption there. And so I really love that one. And then also I thought people might there's this animator, I think his name's Tom Moore is the director, and he's got 2 that you can get access to, and the third one I can't watch. For some reason it's not in the US. Oh, it's on Apple TV, which I'm not going to subscribe to another one. But Song of the Sea is the first one. It's about a Selkie, a guy who has a sister who's a Selkie and their children. And it's just beautiful. And the animation is really different. It's not Disney type animation, which I also like, but it's distinct and artistic. And the other one is called Book of Kells, which is about basically a monastery that is being attacked by Vikings. And they're both really imaginative and deep in that way that Harry Potter is, and yet done on a level anybody can access it. And so those are my recommendations.
Awesome. Those are some really solid recommendations. Thank you so much. Emily, what about you? What have you been reading? Listen, I almost said writing. No, do that. You do. That's real for you. A lot of other people, that wouldn't make sense. Reading, writing, listening to, playing. Do you have to recommend to the listeners?
I do. I'm enjoying the heck out of Deep Space Nine, Star Trek, right now, and I've burned through all of Star Trek in the last 2 years.
Whoa,
coming
that's a feat. There's a lot of it.
There's a lot, and I'd only really ever watched the original series. So, but I figured if I was going to edit a scholarly book on Star Trek, I probably ought to have watched it. So I've burned through all of it, and I'm on Deep Space Nine. It's the last series I have to watch, and I'm really enjoying, especially Avery Brooks's performance. As
Emily,
Captain
didn't
Sisko.
I tell you that you would love Deep Space Nine?
You
religion.
did.
It's religion.
It is. There's so much of that going on, and it's super good. And I had a totally other book I was going to recommend, but then Katy brought up Connie Willis, and I have to say, literally the best science fiction book I have read in the past, I would say, 5 years is The Doomsday Book by Connie Willis, and it's a super thick book, but it's an awesome, especially in this post-pandemic world. Yeah, it's a total page turner. It's a time travel book, but it's really scientific in terms of the way it approaches it, and really, it's a great book. People who love history will love this book because this young person gets transported back into the Middle Ages and ends up not where she was meant to be in the middle of the beginning of the Black Plague, and it's in a time of pandemic, especially. I think that this world that we're living in now, it'll resonate in a new way, much more so than when it was first written. And although it's really funny when they're walking around and I'm just like, hey, guys, just put on some masks. Like, that would be a good idea. Masks are like a superpower. So Connie Willis, The Doomsday Book, is really just such a great book that I had never even heard of until recently.
Yeah,
so
cool. That sounds
highly
amazing.
recommend.
Thank you so much for the recommendation. Brooke, what about you?
I've been Brooke Matherly. You can find me on Instagram at Passion for Parks. Mostly post a lot of pictures of national parks. Right now I'm going through a lot of my photos from Glacier Bay National Park up in Alaska.
Hey, Brooke, my husband is a geologist, and he teaches a freshman seminar on national parks. I think he's doing it this fall.
Oh,
That's so cool.
He's big into national parks.
Does he do it
awesome.
remotely? Can I audit it? Because I love national parks. I've been to 60 of the 63 thus far.
Wow.
So
I think he worked at the Badlands.
Oh, the
love
Badlands are cool.
Yeah, Tina's also been. Yeah, I love Badlands, especially geologically. That's a fascinating place to get to be as a geologist. You can follow me on Instagram. Check out what I've got going on there. In terms of media that I recommend, I just finished reading Winter's Bone by Daniel Woodrell, and if you've seen the movie, it's the same but different. If you've never read Daniel Woodrell, it's the furthest thing from Harry Potter, actually, probably. But he really does write characters and stories that I've simply never read anywhere else. It's kind of like a grungy Faulkner vibe, if you like that at all. But his handling of his characters and his settings, which is mostly like deeply impoverished areas of the Ozarks, is just fascinating. You'll either love it or hate it, but it's something you will have never touched before. It's just completely alien to most of the things I've ever read.
That's awesome.
So I did really like it. So any Daniel Woodrell novel works, but I did like Winter's Bone probably the most of what I've read from him so far.
That's cool. I'll have to check that out because after working in fiction editing for like 10 years, the best thing a book can be to me at this point is surprising. So I'll definitely have to check that out.
Next time you're over, remind me to give you Tomato Red. I think you'd really like that one.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, Katy, Emily, thank you so much for joining us for this unexpectedly long and delightful episode of the Restricted Section.
Yeah, this was so much fun. Thanks, Christina, for having us on. Thanks, Brooke. It was delightful to meet you guys, too.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's always good to connect with other people in the fandom and be like, oh, you're nerds just like us.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. And thank you, Brooke, as always, for being my co-captain.
Happy to not have to do bedtime with an infant. That's my excuse.
Hell yeah. Well, and that's the end of the episode. And I usually end the episode after I say that's the end of the episode. So
Nice. Perfect. I like it. Simple, clear, to the point.
that's it, potheads. Thanks for listening to the Restricted Section. This podcast is produced and hosted by me, Christina Kahn. Our theme music was produced by Ryan Kahn. Our logo was designed by Michael Hardison. Please connect with us on Twitter at RestrictedPod, on Instagram at RestrictedSectionPod, on Facebook at RestrictedSectionPod, or in our Facebook group, The Restricted Section Detention Crew. Join our Patreon to get access to our Discord server, our bonus episodes, and other cool perks. We're also very happy to be a member of Deus Ex Media, where all you fucking nerds can find all kinds of fandom podcasts to suit your fancy.
Have you ever gotten so distracted in Stardew Valley that you forgot to sleep? Have you realised that you have a whole room in your house full of dolls? Or have you even bored your friends to sleep talking about your passion? Well then, Content Capable is the podcast for you. Join me, Sam, as I chat to people passionate about what they do, asking questions about how they fell in love with their passion, what they do, and how it interacts with their day-to-day lives. Catch the podcast every Monday as I find out what makes someone tick, all while gleaning interesting and insightful life lessons along the way. There'll be laughs, a bit of crying, a whole lot of conversations, and we learn just a little bit more about the world around us.
My husband is an audiophile, and so he just routinely upgrades my microphone without my asking. And I'm like, okay. Acts of service, you know?
I also own this mic because Christina's husband sent me links and was like, this is what I would get if I had your budget and needed to get a mic for Christina.
Dave X Media.